and organization for the last 46 years, 20 of which I was the executive director of the National Bison Association, but have also been involved in cooperative development, organic policy and marketing, pet food, and for the last few years leading up to this particular project, had been working with particularly some Native American tribes on some meat processing, food security, feasibility studies, and business development. So, Terri, go ahead.
My name is Terri Birch. I'm retired out of the Army Reserve, spent 4 years on active duty at Fort Hood, Texas, and Fort Richardson, Alaska. I've been in the sandbox and came home after that and decided to change my career, started a nonprofit equine rescue here in Columbus, Kansas on some property that I purchased. And my background is on the construction side of things. So since 2008, I've been working in construction prior to coming to Flower Hill, built a processing facility, some housing units, and worked with grants specifically, and could explain to the business committee for the tribe that I was working for how to spend those funds, because I had a background in the military as an instructor and could read federal regulations pretty well. So I kind of bridged the gap between, especially for you all, for what our language is in the military and what we're used to seeing and reading and doing searches and education wise, to really putting the processing facility or a feeding facility or anything like that on the ground, and how to build that business and write those documents even afterwards for financial processes and procedures, etc., for the business owner, and how to really put it into action. So I can advise on any of the above and connect our clients with who would best be resources for them in their communities.
So we're going to this morning run through a couple of things. Number one is to provide an overview of the technical assistance program and how it came together and what its purpose is, and how particularly veterans can access it, and then go through some of the specific grants there. So Terri's going to be running the clicker, so I will be beeping or advising her when to change the slides. But, just to provide a little bit of background is that, and the need for a more resilient, diverse, and equitable meat and poultry processing system really became evident over the last couple of years. We've seen over the years the consolidation going on in meat and poultry processing, where you've got 80% or above 50%, concentration in all of those. For years, we were told that was the most efficient way, most resilient way to do things, was to have this large concentrated system. And I like to use the analogy from the Wizard of Oz that, little Toto came along and pulled back that curtain and exposed the real wizard there, and sort of the fallacy. Well, that's what COVID did to our food system, and particularly our meat and poultry processing system. So the administration and USDA last year committed $1 billion to creating a more resilient system. Go ahead, Terri. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. That's exactly right. So this commitment, when USDA made this commitment to creating a more resilient system, they knew that if they were just going to give grants to folks to go out and build meat processing plants, that was not going to succeed, is that they really needed to help people and groups build successful businesses from start to finish. And so they said, we need to have some folks that can provide technical assistance to the individuals and the businesses that are developing this. So Flower Hill Institute was brought in to coordinate this technical assistance program, but we have a lot of partners and supporters. Go ahead, Terri. So the scope of work that we have is really fourfold. Number one is we're helping folks with federal funding. We're helping them to develop their businesses. We are providing technical assistance on the ins and outs of processing of both meat and poultry. And we are really working to reform, revise, restructure the supply chain to fit these smaller plants. And we'll talk about that as we go forward. Go ahead. So just to let you know, the Flower Hill team, Roger Frawa is the executive director. Flower Hill itself is a nonprofit that's based on the Jemez Pueblo in New Mexico. It has been around to particularly work with tribal communities through the years on what they call their 4 pillars, which is food and agriculture, climate resiliency, cultural preservation, and youth and education. And so our program that we have fits, of course, within the food and agriculture side. Roger's backed up by a great team. Leslie and Nicole kind of run the back office and keep the ship afloat for everything. Those 3 are located in New Mexico. Shondine Jones, who's our communications manager, is in New York. Go ahead, Terry. I've introduced myself, but Chris Roper is the other regional director for Flower Hill. Chris brings to the party about 15 years of experience directly working with tribes, developing food security and particularly meat processing facilities. Like Terry, he has a real strong background in construction and business development. Chris and I are sort of the public faces on this. We like to say we keep our bags packed all the time because we are around really trying to sit down and meet with folks. Just this month alone, I was in California earlier, both northern and southern, and then Chris and I and Shelby went to Puerto Rico, and now I've been meeting with some folks in Hawaii. Chris has been in Oklahoma. So you say the regional director, we call ourselves regional director, but our region goes all the way from Puerto Rico to the Northern Marianas Islands. And I, in fact, am going to be in Wyoming here the week after next. So Shelby is in Oklahoma. She's the one that really handles all of the TA inquiries that come in. Kate is in Maine, and then Terry is in Kansas. So, you know, we're spread out around the country. Go ahead. So the other organizations the USDA brought on to assist with the technical assistance, it's really a robust program here. There's 5 of them right now. There's the Niche Meat Processor Assistance Network, which is an extension-based program out of Oregon State University. There's the Intertribal Agriculture Council. Both NPAN and Intertribal Agriculture Council brought to this program an existing network of technical assistance providers around the country. So they already had a group in place. But we also have the American Association of Meat Processors, which is the largest organization representing the meat processing industry. But as they like to point out, they don't represent the largest meat processors. It's everybody but the big 4 that they represent. So it's mostly small and very small processors. Then we have the American Meat Science Association and the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute. Both of those organizations focus on helping us develop new ways to market and get value out of the whole carcass. Go ahead. And then one of the things that USDA stressed to us from the outset was that we really needed to reach out to historically underserved producers to make sure that everyone had access to the resources that were being made available and to the technical assistance. And right now we have more than a dozen organizations. And I'm really proud to say that Farmer Veteran Coalition, when I reached out to Jeanette Lombardo, she responded right away early on saying, yes, we want to make sure we get this information out to the veteran community. And they were one of the first groups to come on board with a memorandum of understanding with us to participate. But we have other organizations all the way from Rural Coalition to the National Latino Farmers and Ranchers. Go ahead, Terry. Women in ranching. I think a lot of veterans, female veterans, are involved with women in ranching. You can just see the whole list there, and we're growing that all the time because we want to make sure that we leave no stone unturned when it comes to this kind of outreach. Go ahead, Terry. So again, as I mentioned at the outset, this isn't just about building a processing plant. I like to consider it that we look at it as a bookend approach. First of all, when someone contacts us for technical assistance, we want to find out some of the basic facts. What are the species that you're trying to process? Processing Angus is a little bit different than processing rabbits, and we have requests for both. What are the species? How many? How many people are involved? Are you doing this as an individual business, or is this a group of ranchers that maybe want to develop a co-op? What is the cultural considerations, the seasonality, your finishing protocols? All of those things that really help us define what is the product that you have. Then the other bookend is, what are you going to do with it? Are you just trying to, excuse me, feed your local community? Or do you want to develop a retail brand and go into the marketplace, or maybe go into the food service and provide products for restaurants? Or maybe you just want to supply local institutions, your local schools, and maybe elder nutrition programs. So we try and figure that side of it, and then that really helps us determine the infrastructure to connect those bookends. Go ahead. So, we look at a variety of things, and when it comes to that infrastructure, there in the upper left-hand corner, you can see the traditional brick and mortar facility. That was the Osage Nation plant that opened in December of 2020. Very much a traditional processing facility there that has a retail store as a part of it. A lot of people now are looking at a mobile processing, particularly the upper right. That's a processing unit that the Montana Farmers Union has been developing, and there are considerations on pluses and minuses on that. They're now modular facilities, which are kind of like a prefab. Think about a prefab house where they build it in the factory and they bring it out, and these are like 12 feet wide, 52 feet long units that then they piece together and do that. So those are just three examples. We've even had folks that have just wanted to develop a glorified commercial kitchen with a rail in it and a grinder, because all they want to do is for people within their tribes or their communities bring in their own animals, and rather than processing them in the barn, have a good, clean, sanitary area to do that. So it's the whole variety. And what we do is when people contact us and we get that, we really try and figure out then is the best fit. Is it bricks and mortar? Is it mobile? Is it something else? And we go through sort of this matrix of, do you have access to three-phase power? Do you have access to the water? Do you have workforce in your area? What's the volume you're trying to do? And we kind of work you through that system to help you make the best decision. Go ahead. So in addition to all of that, there are three areas that we've been focusing on. Number one, workforce. Across the country, processors have identified that as one of their key challenges that they're facing, is how do we get a good workforce in there? And I like to say, you just can't take a worker out of a JBS or a Tyson plant and put them into a plant that processes 25 head a day. Because in those big plants, they're an assembly line worker. They send in one place, they do one thing all day long. Whereas we need folks that have a variety of skills, all the way from the harvest floor to perhaps a retail, being in the retail. We need people that know management, that know food safety, those type of things. Fortunately, NIFA, which is a part of USDA, stands for the National Institute for Food and Agriculture, has had some grants out there to help community colleges and technical schools develop workforce training. And we're putting together a list of those institutions that have that so that we can work with the processors. On the financing side, there is a program that is just being stood up. The money is out in the countryside right now, but some is still coming, called the Meat and Poultry Intermediary Loan Program. That is where nonprofit organizations, community finance development organizations, or credit unions, or farm credit can get up to $15 million that they put into a revolving fund that can be used for low interest financing for processing. I mentioned we were just down in Puerto Rico, and there's a group there that got $8 million now that a local pork cooperative comprised of 73 farmers is going to be accessing those low interest funds to help them expand their processing capability. There's the Food Supply Chain Guaranteed Loan Program, which is done through Rural Development at USDA. And for folks that have got processing or on farm, if you're doing farmers markets or direct programs, there's even programs from like what they call the Farm Storage Facility Loan Program that you can get low interest loans for freezers and coolers or even refrigerated trucks for that. So we help hook people up with that. And then the third one is a huge area for us. What do you do with the other half of the animal? And we find without exception that, being able to maximize carcass utilization is key to survival and success. The big guys sell every part of that animal. They may not get a lot of money for certain parts, but they get something. And we are seeing that these smaller processors, unfortunately, are too often paying to have those byproducts, those hides, that offal hauled to landfills. In fact, the Hide and Leather Council of America estimates that 5 million beef hides end up in landfills every year. And so we are working to connect with, for example, on the leather side, we're connecting with apparel manufacturers that are looking for what they call story leather. Their consumers want leather that is tribally produced, or it's bison, or it's regenerative. It has a story behind it. And the same way with pet foods and other products. My background in the pet food industry, I've seen the growing humanization of pets. Fido doesn't sit outside, protect the house anymore. Fido's in bed with, mom and dad these days. I was just in a Costco yesterday, and they have a display in there for Fresh Pet, a refrigerated pet food that, kind of looks like the hamburgers that you cook up for yourself. So those are things where we know that that's a sweet spot, that these smaller processors are producing those type of products that these companies want. We just have to restructure the supply chain and the ability to provide that. So that's a major focus for us. Go ahead, Terri. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Terri, and she's going to walk through then some of the funding opportunities related to this process.
Hey, quick question, Dave. Are there any differences in processing? Jeff wants to know.
Yeah, I mean, the differences, in processing, again, go to what you want to do. If you are just doing something in your local community and you want to just set up a butcher shop, you're going to have a different set of regulations that you go through for custom processing. But as soon as you start to put a commercial label on that and you want to sell it to a grocery store or into a restaurant, well, then you start coming under the USDA or the state inspection and those type of things. And so, again, we kind of help folks go through that process. It also determines the type of equipment you're going to need in there. Packaging, are you going to do any value added? If you're going to do smoked products or jerky or smoked bacon, that's a whole different set of equipment and the design of the facility. So that's what we're here to help you with. And the good thing is our services are free. USDA is supporting us to be able to work with folks so that we can sit down with you and work with you, and you're not going to get an invoice. So.
Are there any other questions for Dave at this point? He'll be back on after the next few slides.
Last question before we go on to the next part. Are there fees associated with technical assistance?
No, as I mentioned, yeah, this is a free service that we offer. And I see the question about how do we arrange for this. We'll cover that because we're trying to make it as simple as possible. So I don't want to spoil, have a spoiler alert here, but we have that.
Okay. Go ahead, Terri.
All right. So I got kind of excited when I heard that I was going to have an opportunity to speak to you all today. Because I'm going to come at this at a little bit different angle. I'm not going to spoon feed it to anybody. I'm going to give you the tools that I use in finding these grant opportunities to be able to assist you in the best way that I can going forward in your career in agriculture. So if you're looking for grants, and you were to come to me, these are the type of things that we're going to go over. So step one is to know the funding agencies within the USDA. And just like in the military, you hear a lot of acronyms, and it really, the first few weeks blew my mind on the amount that, because I wasn't familiar with any of these acronyms. So when you hear AMS, it's Agriculture Marketing Service. When you hear RD, that's Rural Development. NRCS is Natural Resources Conservation Service. FSIS is the Food Safety and Inspection Service. NEFA, Dave already covered, and FSA is Farm Service Agency. All of these agencies have grants and loans and relief programs available to farmers. So know who they are. And I've put the direct address to their websites, and you see the format of that address. For AMS, it's ams.usda.gov, rd.usda.gov. So you don't have to memorize these addresses. You just have to know what format they're in. USDA does have a grants and loans overview webpage where you can start your drill down process. If you're looking for state, so if somebody signs up for TA, typically, and it is under any other program than AMS, who our cooperative agreement is with right now for the MPPTA program, if it's any other grant funding, here over the last month or two, they've been sending those to me because I have reached out to each of those funding agencies and researched what they have available that would help out our farmers and ranchers. So that tip is for state funding opportunities. So if you contact me from New Mexico and I can't find anything under the USDA specific to what your program is, I might pull up a Google search and type in your state and keywords of your program to see what kind of funding is available possibly through your state or even your county or the nearest city next to you. There's all sorts of other funding opportunities out there. And I just do general Google searches more times than not to get started. So step two is to build out your project. One of my jobs is when somebody types in a technical assistance request or an inquiry, then I pick up the phone or I email that client and get all the other information from their program, ask them all of these types of questions. And then I write up a summary, and whoever is the TA provider who works with that person has all of my notes. So you don't have to repeat yourself a lot. But in the beginning, if you're sitting out there and you're wondering if there are grant programs available for your type of program, build out your project, build out your program, know the answers to these questions, which will assist somebody like me, if you're talking to me, on finding the grant funding specific to you or that would assist you the most. Some of those questions are, what are you seeking funding for and how much will it cost? A lot of people start looking for grants before they even know what their project is going to cost, how much it will cost to them, and what their budget is that they have to work with. It's very difficult to help match grants to projects if we don't have any idea what that costs. Now, what Flower Hill can do, Dave and Chris both really specialize in assisting with those project costs and coming up with what that program may not only cost to build, but to facilitate, to actually be in operation. So Flower Hill can provide those services. If you include that kind of information in your TA inquiry, then we know who you need to talk to help come up with those initial budgets. Does the project fit within your existing business plan? I ask this a lot because of a requirement for most grants is to have a project-specific business plan. So if that portion of your business plan can be extracted and say, this is the portion of the business that I'm looking for grant funding for, then it's really easy for you to make a project-specific business plan. If you've never written anything down and you've just grown through the years with whatever the next right decision was, we're going to need to get you to a point where you are writing down what's in your head. Because again, you're going to need that business plan 9 times out of 10 to apply for a grant. Are you wanting to expand your existing market to reach different or additional customers? There is grant funding out there, a lot of grant funding right now, for groups of producers who want to expand their market and reach additional customers. Sometimes the grants say what customers they want you to go after. Like if it's an institutional grant, they want you to provide fresh produce to the local university. They can get really specific, but different or additional customers is something always to be thinking about. Who's the market? Which leads into a project-specific feasibility study. Become familiar with this word. Some grants require a feasibility study. And what that is basically is a third party coming in and looking at your plan and confirming for the USDA, for example, that you've thought about all of these things. You have your budget, you have your business plan, you know your customer, and you know what market you're going to go into, and you have a good head for business, and they're certifying that you're going to be successful with this business that you're starting and that you've thought about all of this stuff. So some grants, a lot of grants require feasibility studies, and they take a substantial amount of time, and they need to be project specific. So once you get a project in mind and you're looking at your business plan and you're thinking about your customers, you can reach out to consultants who specialize in feasibility studies, bring them on board and do it then. Or you can risk when the grant's open that there's not going to be a requirement for a feasibility study, or you may only go after grants that don't require feasibility studies. Typically, when a grant opens, you'll have maybe 90 days to apply for it. 90 days, more than likely, and Dave might correct me here, but I'm thinking 90 days isn't usually enough time for an accurate feasibility study. So this would be something that, but notice the project specific feasibility. So it can't be for your business umbrella, the entire business. This needs to be specific to what you would be applying for grant funding for. Sometimes there's a workaround around the feasibility study. For example, one that's open right now, if you've been producing the commodity for 2 years, then they're not going to require a feasibility study because you come to the table as a subject matter expert and your documentation should be able to substantiate that. But not all of them let that slide. And lastly, for this specific slide at this point is sam.gov. If you don't know what sam.gov is and you do not yet have a unique entity identifier, and you are considering at any point in the future applying for a grant, go to sam.gov and sign up. It doesn't cost anything. If you get into a website that's saying that they want to charge you $100 for your sam.gov registration, don't do that. Go direct to sam.gov, sign up for it. It's going to take a couple of weeks to get your unique entity identifier, but you can't apply for any grants without it. I mean, that's just it. It used to be a different type of number. It eludes me at the moment what the name of it used to be, but every company that gets a grant has to have a sam.gov number, and that number goes through the history of your organization with all of the grants and stuff. And so it makes your file number pretty much. So when I mentioned, you know, we can match you up with different people, and that feasibility study and that business plan, one of the first things that people ask me when I mention those things is, where do I even go? Where do I start with doing something like that? I know it's a good business because I built it from ground up, but I never wrote anything down. So with FHI resources on Flower Hill's website, there are unvetted consultants who have signed up to service clients. So there's a spreadsheet that comes up when you go to that address, and it tells you about the company, it tells you the location of the consultant firm, it tells you what they specialize in. And I encourage people to contact 3 or 4 of them that do what it is, provide the service that you're looking for, and who could best serve your company in general. So you call them and you interview them basically over the phone, get their pricing and all that stuff before you ever decide. Don't just ever go with the first person you call just because it's easy. So those technical writing consultants, they will charge. So again, get their prices. And then the tip for this slide is that it's easier for me, if you come to me with your project, it's easier for a specific project for you to have thought about these questions and for me to be able to recommend different grants that are open at the time than it is to say, I saw this grant is open, how can I apply for this, and not have an idea of what project you actually want to do ahead of time. Although I have people who do that too. I'm like, okay, tell me about your company and what you do, and I'll let you, I'll tell you, advise you on how you might qualify for this. All right, step 3. So questions to ask yourself when you're researching a grant. These keywords in quotes of, and if y'all have been through any military NCO type training, then you have Googled a PDF and you have Googled, performed Google searches. When you're looking at looking for grants, these keywords translate into what that question is. So for example, when is the grant due? Well, remember I said about 90 days out, but when it opens to when it's due, that's your first indicator. If you just found this grant and you find a due date of next Tuesday, you probably ought to just stop there unless you have all the stuff ready for it. So the due date, this is in order actually. When I research a grant for somebody, these questions are what I answer in order. And if any one of these is a no-go, then I stop and I move on to a different grant. So the due date's the first one. Do I qualify to apply? How do you know you qualify to apply? You can search for the keywords eligible applicant. That's the terminology that USDA uses to tell you, and they have a list. In every grant document, there's an eligible applicant section, and that will tell you if you are one of those entities that it is listed that you could apply for this. Now, if one of those, if you're wondering if you're actually, if you will qualify, for example, as a producer, then USDA provides those definitions. I'm telling you, it reads just like a military manual. If you don't know what a word might mean, then there's a list of definitions somewhere within that document, that program, one of the regulations that deal with that program, or within the request for applications that defines that word. So different programs define those application types in various ways, depending on what the funding is meant for. How much money can I request? That sounds like how my mom would do a Siri search on her phone, and she'd say this long question, but in actuality, all you've got to do is search the document or search the website for the grant with the keywords maximum, grant amount, or minimum. 95% of the time, that's going to get you direct to the question and the answer. How much will this cost me out of pocket? Hopefully you understand if you're looking for grants, or you will after this webinar, that they do give money, but there's always a cost. So there's a share. If your project, for example, is $100, and that's it's just easy math. If your project costs $100 and they're able to, they say your cost share is 20%, then you're going to pay $20 of that. And typically at the beginning, when you apply for the grant, you need to have in the application that amount you have accessible to you. So typically they ask, where's the other part of this money coming from? One of them that's currently open is a 50-50. So for every dollar of the grant that you apply for, there is $1 that you have to match. Do you have access to that match, that cost share? Or does it have to be cash? Or can it be in kind, like the cost of the input that you've already provided? You know, you already own it. So that fair market value of the commodity input can sometimes be counted towards your share. Your salary or your work in the field towards that, you know, growing that commodity can sometimes be included in that cost share, but you have to know each program is different, and those little, the way that that's qualified is always something unique. Be aware of what that cost share, what that grant's going to cost you. And then and notice most people come to me and they're wanting to know what it covers, and I back them up and I say, okay, first, do we have time to do it? Can you apply for it? Are you eligible? How much money are you wanting to request to your project budget? And do you have that additional money? I don't care what the program covers. If the program doesn't, if you can't say the right answers to all of those previous ones, then it doesn't matter what it covers. So down the road a little ways here, then you're covering the activities. That's the word, activities, and it's eligible or ineligible. Again, 9 times out of 10, if you do a PDF search or a document search for eligible or ineligible, you'll hit that. And then what are the requirements to fulfill the grant after the award is made? CFR is Code of Federal Regulation. If you don't know it, that little funky sign right there means part. Terms and conditions, search for those keywords, and reporting. You're going to have to report it either semi-annually or annually or quarterly. There's going to be a reporting requirement. And there's examples of how those look, those keywords that you can Google. And then read the entire RFA. People don't like to read the request for applications, the application document itself. Sometimes if the RFA doesn't explain it, you can look at the application template and start answering those questions in your mind, and it'll tell you things. And then every funding agency has a general terms and conditions document that applies to all of their awards that you will have to adhere to when you start spending the money. There's usually a webinar on the grant or a recorded webinar. Sign up for it, listen to it. There's always a frequently asked questions document provided by the funding agency that you can skim through that'll give you a lot of answers. And then also typically USDA grants, when they reopen, they list the previous award recipients. And so you can look at their projects to get ideas and to see similar ways that people have applied in the past. All right, so to locate a USDA grant webpage, really easy. USDA, the letters USDA in your Google search bar, plus the acronym of the grant. Or if you don't know the acronym of the grant that you're looking for, you can type in the word. So look, I used USDA MPPEP, so MPEP. And this is the first hit that came up for me. But notice people also search for, get into the conversation of what you're looking for. Those other key searches right there may give you different results, although the first one is what I was looking for. Notice the website address for the MPEP. That is actually, it says rural development. So you know RD means rural development, rd.usda.gov. So go to that webpage and start reading through the documents that are available. This is what that webpage looks like. The request for applications, again, RFA, that's your key search term. All our USDA grants have an RFA that comes out when they are open. Now for the VAPG, the value added producer grant, they put it out in the register. So it comes out, it's got a regulation with it whenever it hits the road or hits the open market. And they typically have a fact sheet. Notice here, this circle, it says fact sheet. That fact sheet is sometimes useful, sometimes not so useful. It'll give you the language that you need if you want to do further research on what that grant may cover. And then these tabs across the middle of the page. And keep in mind this, I typed in USDA MPEP and it goes to this page. And so now this page lays out the other stuff that you need to find, how to apply, other requirements. You can click through all of that. You can look at the fact sheet. And the information I give to people is not secret squirrel stuff. It's just because I know how to do this process. The next slide. Okay, so now we've found the RFA and we've opened it up. And like any good military regulation too, there is an index in the front that's going to tell you by section where to find all the information that you need. We talked about eligible applicants. And this is the second page of this document. So notice eligible applicants, and it gives you the page number, the cost share and matching, and what's not eligible, activities eligible for funding. They lay it out in the index. So you don't really have to read the whole document, but you do need to find those specific things to be able to answer those questions that I mentioned earlier. Am I eligible to apply? That's the big thing. If you're not eligible to apply, just quit and lay it aside. I have some people who really want to apply, and so they'll go find a partner who is on the eligible applicant list. Do PDF searches. This comes up as a PDF. You can do all of the standard searches, just like I would find stuff, have my students find things. I taught a military police reclassification course for 9 years. And the first class I would have is, okay, gentlemen and ladies, this is how you use this regulation. I'm telling you, this is how you use this document. Okay, so step 7 under grants.gov. Okay, so you've applied for SAM at sam.gov. You did that UEI, and once you have that UEI, you can get onto grants.gov and you can sign up, and it's free. Don't ever pay somebody to sign you up for grants.gov. This is the USDA database for, well, across the federal government, actually. It's not just USDA, it's all the federal government grants will be able to be found in this website. This is the premier location to go to. If there's an open grant out there, I'm going to say 95% of the time it'll be on this site. Once you find the RFA on a search on the USDA webpage, for example, you find the RFA, it'll have a number at the top of it, and that number is this RDRBS 22-01. This is MPEP last year. But it'll have that number, and you can take that number. I'm pointing to the screen like you can see it. Can you see my mouse moving? You can put that number into enter keyword, or you can do this just like you did the Google search earlier, and you can type in USDA MPPEP, and it'll bring up the same page. And again, in this page, You have all the related documents. If you don't have the RFA yet, it'll have the RFA, it'll have the additional information that you need to apply. Notice it says last updated. So by March 25, 2022, if I pulled this up, I'd know it was closed already, because typically you only have 90 days to apply. And that last update shows me that it was the previous time that it opened. See, it was posted on February 25th, and then it was archived after closing on May 31st. Closing date was May 11th. You can get all of that information right there at the beginning. And there's this slide presentation we can make available to you, or you can watch the video that he's recorded it and get that information again. And then step 8 is to visit Flower Hill's website. So when you type in this address for Flower Hill Institute /USDA-MPPTA, Meat and Poultry Processing Technical Assistance, you fill out a 5-minute TA inquiry form behind that little orange button right there. And it will notify Dave and Chris and me. It comes to me automatically too. And then Dave and Chris kind of match you up with who in our variety of network collaborators could best suit your purposes for what the information for the project that you put in there. And then explore the toolkit and resources. Wander around the website some. That next button, this toolkit button, will take you to another page that'll have all sorts of resources on it. And one of those resources are for grants and loans. And you click on the grants and loans button, which takes you to this address, flowerhill.institute /USDA-grants-loans. You'll find a summary of all current open grants and loans in that location, if you were to type that address in direct. And play around on the website and see all the resources. It's amazing. It really is. Down and dirty. I know, Dave, I'm sorry. I talked a little bit longer than I was expecting to. If there's anybody who has any questions at this point, I'll answer. And otherwise, Dave will wrap things up.
Yeah, I can wrap some things up. There's some questions in the chat there that I want to get to, but we just got about 2 more slides here, and then we'll have so anyway, this is just an overview. This week we officially went over 500 requests for technical assistance that we've received since we launched exactly a year ago. So tells us there's a lot of demand out there, and we're working to get to all of those. Go ahead. So this is, what Terri just said. You can do it. There's an easier step. If you got a camera, you can just take a picture of that QR code, and that takes you right to our page so that you can submit a request. And as Terri said, it takes all of about 5 minutes to do that. But it's very important to submit that request, because that gets you into our database. And what we will do is we analyze it. Some of the requests come in, we can answer with just a simple email of, oh, you were looking for this particular grant, here's the website to go to it. Some of them, we need more information. So a lot of times, particularly Chris or I or Terri, will say, hey, do you have, is there a time next week that we could get on a phone or a Zoom for about an hour and talk to you about your project to see what you specifically need? And then we try and connect you with the appropriate TA provider. And it's important to stress, this is not a one and done. This is a long-term commitment. So you might be working with one technical assistance provider as you're developing your grant, but then as you start, building out a facility, we'll bring someone else. Chris might be more involved, or if you're looking at a market plan, I'll get more involved. So we try and work with you all the way through the process. Go ahead. So that's, our information there. And I just want to stress, the thing we're here for is to make it easier for you. Terri went through a lot of meat and potatoes there, and we don't want you to have to try and tackle that all on your own. I know that one of the questions that came up was, do you ever get a grant without a professional grant writer? Yes, some people do tackle grants themselves, and it's very important. We have archived in our toolkit a webinar that we did specifically on grant writing and how to do that. We can't write the grant for you. We can't do the feasibility study. Excuse me, but we're here to help you or the grant writer to put together the best proposal they can. Trying to think, what were some of the other questions here, Diego? Somebody was asking about MPERG grants, and unfortunately, I don't know that there's going to be another round. MPERG was a meat processing inspection readiness grant, and that was a grant specifically out there to help facilities get USDA inspection. And they had 2 rounds, but that pool of money may be gone for now. So unless they get additional money appropriated, I don't know that there's going to be another MPERG grant specifically, but there are some other grants that are out there that getting your federal inspection can be part of your proposal. Be a company to apply for a SAM number or an individual. Terry, go ahead. You can tackle that one.
You can apply for it as an individual. I am pretty sure. I know you can get a grant, or you can get a grants.gov account as an individual. I would, as I advise people, I would establish the LLC or whatever it is that you're going to be working under before the UEI, to keep it separate from you yourself in case you're starting anything else in the future.
Jeff, I noticed your question here about qualifying if you want to supplement a local custom cutter with a USDA inspector, if they're willing to work with you. Yeah, there are things, we have folks that are developing facilities to essentially do a cut and wrap thing, or they're going to be, a USDA inspected facility. It's important to note that if you're going to put products into the marketplace with a USDA inspected seal under it, it has to be in an expected facility from start to finish. They have to have that whole chain from the time that animal was knocked to it's put in the package. But we have folks that are developing some facilities where they're not going to be slaughtering the animals. They're going to be bringing in the carcasses or box meat or whatever. So again, we can take a look. Grants are different. There are grants out there right now for what they call the local agriculture marketing program, the farmers market promotion program, which is a misnomer because it's not just for farmers markets, it's for direct marketing things. There's a regional food systems. Each one is a little bit different. And we just want to make sure you're finding the one that fits best for you.
Let's see, there was another one. Do disabled vets get grant preference?
Most of the grants will have a preference built in there for historically underserved or disadvantaged producers. It varies. Some of the grants, for example, there's a scoring thing. And this is one of the things I always stress to people. When you start writing a grant, USDA grants have a very specific scoring criteria. They'll give 20 points for economic viability. They'll give 15 points for community benefit, whatever. And you do all of that. And then generally there's some points that are reserved for the grant administrator to make sure that some of those are getting out to underserved, and disabled vets would certainly be in that category.
Okay. There's one more. What's the life of this program, the MPPTA?
The MPP, they are talking about this being a 5-year program. Again, a long-term commitment. Right now, we're on a 2-year contract, but we're under discussion right now for the 3-year extension on it, and very optimistic that, we'll have this in place. Again, it's going to take a long time for, ideally people say, gosh, okay, we applied for this grant in February and we're going to do our ribbon cutting in November. No, we know that this is a long-term process.
And I believe that's all the questions that we have for now. Terry or Dave, you have anything else left to say?
No, well, I would just say, our contact information is on there. We strongly encourage you to get, your request in for technical assistance. Because the other thing about the important part of doing that then is you get our monthly newsletter where we provide you with information on resources that are out there. And then anytime a grant comes open, we do a blast out to all of the folks that have contacted us for technical assistance. So you'll be seeing, oh gosh, this, the value added producer grant just came open. And it'll help you to start to do your research or to reach out to us for assistance.
All right. Terry, anything else?
I'm just now catching up on some of the questions and stuff. No, I don't have anything else. You guys just feel free to send me an email. It's what I do. If you have any questions or just want to know where something is or what something means, keep my email handy, and if I don't know the answer, I'll find it for you or help you find it.
Okay.
And Diego, I just want to say in closing, one more time, thank you to Farmer Veteran Coalition. This is a great partnership for us. Farmer Veteran Coalition has been very eager to step out and include us in, webinars, podcasts, presentations. So as you as participants in this webinar involved with Farmers Veterans Coalition, don't hesitate to let Diego or Jeanette or folks know, other ways that we can assist.
Yes, and ending on that, like he said, feel free to reach out to us. I will send me my email is diego@farmvetco.org. If you would like a recorded version of this, I will email it to you. I can also email it to Dave and Terry. That way they have it with them as well. If they can get it, you can get it from them as well. Just thank you for joining us. Please follow us on Facebook. Like Dave said, he's on a podcast with us, so check out the podcast. It's a great episode. It's Vets in Ag. Let me go. I will go ahead and put in my email just so you guys can reach out to me. But again, thanks for attending. Be on the lookout. We'll still be working with Flower Hill in the future, and I hope all this is very helpful for everyone. So thank you.